Shout out to Kaytranada. If you're from Montreal, like, how could you not be inspired by him?
Yeah, like he's
That's
like
my
he's
thing.
like the best artist of our time from Montreal. That was a moment from our reaction to Kaytraminé's new album from Kaytranada and Aminé. If you guys want to check out the whole live album reaction, the link is now available in our description. But let's get on with this review. This has been one of the most anticipated albums of the entire year because we knew we were going to get some summer vibes, and the singles such as Forever and Rebuke were hitting hard. So let's get started with the artist performance. What did you like? What did you not like about it?
Well, listen, I want to single this out to Aminé because I want to talk about more about, the Kaytranada performance and the production, which is going to come right after this category. And listen, Aminé did his job on the album. I think that he brought a nice flair and energy throughout the entire project. I feel like he was very braggadocious, and we'll talk a bit more about the content matter in the content section. But yeah, I also think that he kind of took a step forward with his singing on certain tracks, but on certain ones as well, I do feel like it kind of fell a bit flat to a certain extent. So, like, what did you like out of Aminé, and what didn't you like?
Yeah, I think that, like, I just really fucked with his whole approach to the album for how carefree it was and how a lot of the verses had, like, this freestyle feeling to them. And there was just, like, this big emphasis on being loose. And that's kind of what you want when it comes down to, like, a summer dance hip-hop album. It's kind of a case where I feel like he treated it where, like, anything goes, but not everything should have gone in the sense, because you also have certain hooks that just don't land. For example, on something like you have Aminé just kind of moaning all throughout it, which doesn't really sound that great sonically speaking. Apart from that, I mean, you do have stronger hooks from Aminé on something like Rebuke, and that's one thing I want to sort of give him props for, is the fact that in terms of a singing level, he really upgraded from like his previous projects. So that was a highlight for me. Apart from that, I feel like Aminé's at his best when he's giving you this confident, slick talk on certain songs like Who He Is, for example, where he kind of keeps the energy at a high point the entire track. If it's through his ad-libs, if it's through the way he's delivering his words, he always sort of kept you entertained, and he never felt like he phoned in any single verse.
No, that's very true, especially on K&A, which is the outro of the album. I think that's easily one of his best performances throughout the entire album because it's a longer cut on the project, and you see that it's kind of unorthodox in comparison to the rest of the album because it's a lot more rap heavy centric, especially when it comes to the performance from Aminé. And I like the way that he transitioned from one beat to another, just the way that he was able to switch flows. And it was cool too because it was quick, but it was also pronounced. Like, I'm not sure if you noticed this, what he was doing with his lines on that song, especially towards the end, but he would extend, let's say, the last word of his line towards, let's say, the end of his paragraphs, which I really enjoyed as well. When it comes down to even something like Shut the Fuck Up, I'm not a big fan of that performance, if I'm being honest with you. It feels off. It didn't feel nice for the track list. But
what's the best performance in your opinion?
Oh, I think it's definitely going to be Forever for me.
It is Forever, and I feel like you find the same type of performance on something like Let's Talk About It, where you have Aminé tackling the beat with this slow but steady rhythm, where he's able to just slide throughout the grooves of the track.
I like him as a rapper because I feel like he also has a very unique voice and cadence in comparison to the rest of the game. And listen, you're not going to be getting like Limbo type performances on here. I don't think that was the intention of the album, but even Who He Is has that sort of like breezy, more like calm sort of settle.
That one's more aggressive, I feel like, on the intro. You think so?
I don't know. I feel like because he's not necessarily like in your face on Who Is He. It's a bit more calm, but like it's a bit more menacing. I get what you're saying, but for the most part, I think Aminé did a good job on the project. He did what he had to do. It sounds good all throughout it. You do have your mislaps on the project, but for the most part, he was solid.
It was a good performance, but let's now go on with the production. And this was interesting just because Kaytranada is one of the best producers in the game right now, and I feel like one thing that you can get out of this soundscape is an unpredictability factor, as well as him experimenting with different sounds. I mean, you have different sort of flourishes of dance hall at certain times. You have traditional hip-hop on a song like Who He Is, for example, where you have the drum sample from this old Busta Rhymes song, and you get like this 90s hip-hop bounce.
Not only that, but you're going to find Afrobeat on something like Sauce Up as well, where it kind of puts you into that nice groovy like sort of feel, and you could find those types of productions as well on Bubba. So, I mean, how do you feel like Kaytranada's aesthetic changed from, let's say, this project in comparison to what he usually does, let's say, on something like a 99.9% or even, let's say, a Bubba, more the traditional?
It didn't change all that much in the sense that, like, if you look at a song like or Master P, you have, like, the instrumental outros dedicated to Kaytranada sort of doing his own thing and bringing in his flavor of, like, that electronic dance style that he's kind of known for. So I feel like that was cool that we had a lot of songs that got those instrumental ride outs because you have a master at work, you want to hear him cook on his own for a little bit for certain portions of the songs. One song that I loved, but I feel like didn't fit the vibe of the album was actually West Side. And it's amazing because you have a Kaytra beat like no other, where you have these Halloween-esque violin strings, and it kind of feels like a mix between a trap beat and a classical beat, but does it fit the summer vibe? Not really.
That's the thing, though, is that the track itself is absolutely amazing. I think that I'm going to be going back to it like almost all summer, but it's not necessarily a song for the summer rotation.
Yes.
So then you kind of ask yourself, you're like, okay, where was this creative decision taken, and like, does it fit the whole summer vibe of the album, which was of course the intent of the project?
One big question I have for you is one of my favorite beats on here is actually K&A, where you have this amazing soul sample and a crazy beat switch, which was probably the only song with a beat switch on here for the most part. I loved it, but another question of, do you think that fit the vibe of the album?
No, but I'm still happy I got it. I'm going to be honest with you.
It's one of the best songs on here.
Obviously, like, if you have to be a prick and you have to start, like, nitpicking at certain things, you'd be like, yeah, no, this doesn't belong on a summer album.
But that was something that sort of, like, disrupted my experience in a sense, where I had a couple of those productions where I'm like, this is really taking me out of this world that they built for the first 6 tracks, where I'm sort of immersed into this summer, breezy, bright, uplifting sort of energy. And that's also the case with probably the worst beat on here, which is Shut the Fuck Up, where you have sort of like a Neptunes inspired beat gone wrong, and you have like these weird elements coming in and out of the mix where I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah, I really didn't enjoy that beat. I feel like it was also awkward for Aminé to be able to attack that, and it kind of just ruined the tempo of the song. Not only that, but like you were saying, from 1 to 6, man, the productions were slapping. You had the summer beats going on, besides West Side maybe, and even Rebuke was one of the best beats on this entire album. Very breezy, feels like you're in Hawaii, almost feels like you're in Bikini Bottom, low key. That's kind of the way that that's
those
kind of
like aquatic strings, but in a good way though.
It is absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'm not downplaying that production. I think it was fantastic, but yeah, it's weird because I think this is one of the first misses I've ever heard from Kaytranada. If I'm being honest with you, if I have to be completely honest with you, he's a Montreal legend. Like, I really love his stuff. He's one of my favorite artists. But yeah,
but the highs were high. Like something like Forever is one of the best produced songs of the entire year. I love those deep funk grooves. The percussion is hitting hard. So
the drums are super bouncy as well. Like, it just, and also I like the way that it was mixed and mastered, because I was able to play it in my AirPods. I also played it in my car. I played it on the mini speaker while I was doing thumbnails, and the record sounded good across the board on any sort of audio device that I was playing. But for the most part, I think the production was great. You know, I think that it's a strong suit within the album. I think that Kaytranada did his job, and for the most part, I think there could have been better calculations in certain areas, but that's just me nitpicking. You know, for the most part, I really enjoyed the production.
I think it was great. But let's now go on to the features, and this was definitely a big talking point within the album, because you got Aminé working with artists that he's never worked with before, but you got Kaytranada working with artists that he has worked with before, such as a Mick Jenkins or a Freddie Gibbs. So let's get started with Freddie Gibbs, because it is the first feature on the album, and
best verse on the album.
Literally the best verse on the album. He stole the fucking show, and he's just going off with the usual sort of, you know, hardcore hip hop that he brings, and has bars about like fucking all the nurses when his baby was born. But
that's what's cool, is that like he's kind of matching Aminé's tempo of content matter for the album, where, you know, we're going to talk about it more in the content, but it's extremely sexual, and like you go through it, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but you know, Freddie Gibbs comes through and offers sort of like this nice breath of fresh air for it, where like none of the bars were corny, everything was on par, everything interconnected. So I think Freddie Gibbs was a major W. Now, even going on to someone like Big Sean and Master P, that was a fantastic feature. This guy has been on a run, either if it was this or even Palisades, California, off of the new Larry June album. He has been on a run with his features. So how do you feel about the Big Sean feature?
Big Sean is on a tear right now. I mean, this guy is unstoppable. Another example within the album where I feel like the feature stole the show. Probably the only other example of that, to be honest with you. But yeah, I loved his wordplay all throughout it. The whole like profit wordplay
super cool
throughout
stuff.
that line, that was dope. And yeah, just even the flow switches, bro. Like, he was really in a different zone, and it gets me excited for the next Big Sean record, to be honest with you. So,
absolutely,
major highlight. Let's go on to Pharrell now, who had more of a minimal role to play on Forever, but it was a great fucking hook, bro. I
Absolutely,
loved it.
But it was also integral to the production, because the way I think that Kaytranada took his voice and actually chopped up certain like aspects of his voice to like kind of blend it in within the production. So I think if you take Pharrell off of Forever, you don't have Forever.
It's also probably the catchiest hook out of the whole album.
It's the best hook on the album, absolutely, and adds a lot to the production. I do feel like it was a strong suit within it. But let's talk about Snoop Dogg on I. If I'm being honest with you, like, I fuck with Snoop Dogg. I don't think he's been in the best form lately, but it's just standard. I mean, it's nothing too crazy.
Yeah, it's run of the mill. You know, he's giving you that slow burning flow with, you know, some easygoing love bars. So he kind of did what he had to do, but he didn't take it to a heightened level, in my opinion. But it did fit the song. You know what I mean? Like, it definitely had its place within the album. Now, the feature that was a surprise to a lot of people was actually Mick Jenkins, who's actually doing the hook on Master P. And I didn't pick up on this on my first listen, but it was just cool to see him there. You know, he didn't have to do anything crazy, but knowing the history that he has with Kaytranada, it was great to see him on there.
Absolutely. But let's talk about Amari on the song Sauce Up. So listen, Sauce Up would have been my favorite songs on the album. If it
would have been your
wasn't
favorite?
One of my favorites.
okay.
It would have been in the top tier of the track list for me just because I love the Afrobeat production. I think, you know, Aminé does a good job on the verses. The hook could have been better from Aminé, but for the most part, it's a really strong track. I didn't like the feature, bro. I'm being honest with you. It's not horrible, but it's just like I could have completely gone without it if I'm being
the high
pitch.
pitched vocals weren't the greatest. I felt like I was listening to like 645 AR at one point, but it grew on me with more listens. It's not horrible. It doesn't totally ruin the track, but it was definitely one of the weaker features. But yeah, Freddie Gibbs and Big Sean, like that rhyme scheme Big Sean has, bro. Like he just brings this different vitality to the track that was needed. So overall, I think that the features were great.
I think the features were great.
You know,
absolutely.
Yeah, because you have the highlights of the Snoop, of the Pharrell and the Freddie Gibbs. Not Snoop. Freddie Gibbs, Pharrell, and Big Sean that really carried it out all the way through. But let's get into the content, which to me is definitely the weakest aspect of this album. And I want to say this. We didn't go into this album expecting the most personal or introspective or lyrical, you know, subject matter from Aminé, because that's not what you want out of like an easygoing summer album. But it was just a bit too raunchy for me.
It was.
The sexual bars really took you out of some of the songs. For example, he had that repeated refrain of, if the dick don't hang, the beat can bang. I don't know what that means.
And like the whole thing of like Kaytranada made a slap Will Smith. Like there was certain cultural references within the album.
A lot of pop culture references.
And I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of that, just because I do feel like there could have been more to offer. And listen, I do think that Aminé tried to do a good job with the content matter and tried to match the vibe of the album. Because as you said, like you don't want like a pressure in my palms sort of performance or content matter on here. It just wouldn't make sense for the vibe of the album. It's just that, as you said, there is a lot of corny bars in here, and it does weigh down the content.
It does, and I feel like the punchlines are not always as clever as you want them to be. Like, I just popped an X. I'm feeling like Malcolm. Like, there's a lot of those bars where you're like, this is sort of like elementary level for Aminé, because we know how good of a lyricist he could be if you listen to songs like A Burden, for example. You know what I mean?
And going back to what you were saying is that you don't necessarily want that, but even if you were to just like tone it down a bit and just get a bit more focused with the writing, where like maybe, yes, you obviously have to include some filler lines to be able to like carry the vibe of the album, but you could do it in a much better fashion.
Not only that, but like when you go to the best writing you get on the entire album, it is when he's getting a little bit more personal on K&A, where he's sort of rapping about how difficult it is to deal with fame, as well as the issue with seeking validation. Like, that made for one of the best songs on the entire album, but it didn't really necessarily fit the vibe of the album all the way.
Even at that, like you get choruses like, let's say, where you look at the writing and you're like, man, that's not catchy whatsoever. Like, I get it, and I have no problem with sexual content matter. I think it works actually really well on a summer album. But Morning in the Morning and She Loud, like, you get what I'm trying to say? It just, it doesn't
Also,
necessarily fit the vibe of the album.
One of the only men who knows where the clit is, like, it's just, it's a bit out there. I get it.
The Sex in the City bars. Like,
yeah, it's just too many pop culture references that came off a bit cheesy to me personally, but I do think he has his good fair share of clever bars at certain points, and as well as him sort of making you feel like he's living this life of luxury, traveling in different places of the world. And I think that there's a good mix of subject matter, but overall, it could have been improved.
It could have definitely been improved.
So I think we're going to go with mid on the content.
I know. I felt bad giving this rating just because, like, you kind of understand why you went for that type of approach and writing style. It's just that it didn't come off the best, to be quite honest with you guys. But you know what's funny is that it doesn't really take away from the actual experience for me all that much. Like,
no, it doesn't.
Because you're more in the groove of the productions, Aminé's flows and the melodies carry everything out. So it's not that big of a deal. But let's talk about the replay value, because when it comes to Kaytranada, honestly, like every single year, if you know my Spotify rap, he is literally my most played artist every single year. His music is versatile, could be played in every setting. And what I was looking for out of this album was a summer album, a track list to be able to carry me from the months of May all the way to September. Nice season. Let me get into a track list. I did find it, but I didn't find it, if I'm going to be quite honest with you, because I do have songs on here that I'm going to be going back to, example, who he is, example, Let's Talk About It Forever, West Side, Master P, Rebuke, K&A, Sauce Up I'll go back to. It's been growing on me, but for the most part, you have like that 8 to 10 where you're like, I'm not really taking much out of that, especially on the second half of the track list. There was a dip on the second half.
I think there is a lot of replay value just because there's not many rappers that have pulled off a really cool summer album, and that's what they accomplished here, in my opinion. Not only that, but I think that especially from going from tracks 1 to 6, you do have that consistent vibe and mood of the summer breeziness, and I feel like that's going to be enough to get me to go back. Apart from that, in terms of how many skips there are in this album, I would say that Sauce Up has grown on me. I wouldn't say that it's a skip, so I would probably go with a 2 skips out of 11, which is not really that much. But you do have like mediocre songs, like a Sauce Up or an I.
I'm not sure if Sauce Up is mediocre right now. The production is fantastic, and just like Aminé's verses are good. I think that's going to be the grower on the album for me. I do think that I is a bit mediocre, if I'm being completely honest with you. I'm not the biggest fan of the production. It's not the highlight for me. Not only that, but Aminé's whole approach to the track wasn't the most lively and energetic, so it doesn't necessarily get me into it. Plus, you have that Snoop Dogg feature that it's okay, but I just feel like maybe it wasn't needed, and then shut the fuck up and or absolute
But
skips.
I could definitely see myself like playing this in the whip on summer drives, and also just going to parties, barbecues, and just having this on in the background. So there's definitely a lot of value to this, also just because it is one of the more refreshing hip-hop albums that we've gotten in recent times. So overall, I think the replay value is great. Besides a few skips, you do have a pretty consistent track list for the most part.
But okay, overall thoughts on the album, man. So listen, I'm satisfied. Yesterday after the first reaction, I wasn't, though. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, after the first listen, I think I had too many high expectations for the album, and I was expecting too much. But for the most part, when I gave it my consecutive listens and when I went back into it and really tried to dive deep, live with it, maybe smoke a bit of kush with it too, get into the vibe, I'm enjoying it. I'm being honest with you. I mean, you're getting great production from Kaytranada. Aminé is providing these energetic and really nice bouncy performances throughout the entire track list. You have amazing features. You have the replay value. I can't ask for more, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, I was really torn when it came to like my overall thoughts, just because I feel like once we kind of got through all the ratings and really dissected it, it kind of leaned towards a great album, but a part of me feels like it's a good album. So I feel like it's kind of the lightest great rating we're ever going to give an album. And I think that the reason for that is just that it had the potential to be a lot better than it was, in my opinion. But you still had a track list filled with some of Aminé and Kaytranada's best ever songs, with a mix of some of their weakest songs at the same time.
That's very true.
Apart from that, though, they definitely accomplished creating an album that was filled with a lot of chemistry. They were definitely a perfect pair.
The chemistry was on point throughout the entire track.
They were a perfect pair throughout this whole track list. The features that they brought in made a lot of sense for the track list. I love what Kaytranada did in terms of just being creative with his beats. If it's him throwing in a distorted vocal sample or reversing it, or him sampling an old Busta Rhymes song, whatever the case may be, he knew what to do best. And Aminé's confidence was vibrant. It was exhilarating. It kept me entertained all the way throughout. We're going to give this a great rating, but like I said, probably the lightest great score we've ever given up to this point.
Yeah, but I'm okay with it, though. I'm fine with the rating as well. But guys, let me know in the comment section, where do you think we got it right? Where do you think we got it wrong? And not only that, but if you are new to NFR Podcast, smash that subscribe button. And as Lou mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we did do a full-blown live album reaction with our community on Patreon. If you guys want to check it out, the whole recording is uploaded on our page. You guys could visit the link in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching this review, and we'll catch you in the next one.